everyone, you're very welcome to another Wednesday of Revenue Hacks. My name is Christina Quigley. I've actually forgot I changed my name a while back. I should have actually paid attention to that. And I am Group Revenue Manager from JMK Group. You are with us here on Revenue Hacks in association with WHTT. So excited about today. If you've never heard of this man, I don't know where you've been. We've got Éanna Hassett joining with us. Éanna is a huge advocate of Buy Irish, pushing Irish produce, but also hotels across the world. He's known for his F&B and his operation style, how he deals with everything. So it's great to have him on the call. So we're going to do a quick round robin of who we are, what we do, in case you're the first time joining us, and we'll fly through it. So Suzanne.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Williams. I'm the Revenue and Performance Director for Journey Hospitality here in Cheltenham. We are a marketing agency and tech.
B.
Hey, I'm B. So I'm the founding and managing director of MyOC. It's a consulting company helping hotels and tech businesses optimizing revenue overall. And
last but not least, Éanna, tell us where you're sitting at the moment, because we all know where you are, but the audience doesn't, and tell us all about you.
So my name is Éanna Hassett. I'm the Director of Operations for Chateau de Cudjoe. So it's a private luxury golfing resort in about an hour south of Paris. So I'm just currently in the Chateau at the moment. I've previously worked in Ritz-Carlton's, Ashford Castle, lots of luxury hotels in food and beverage mostly. So really looking forward to the chats.
Looks very French behind you.
I know. I'm not going to lie. I've been in awe of this. And we done our prep call a few weeks back, and he was sitting in his office. So I was kind of expecting him to sit in the office, but not like this grandeur behind him. It's just wow.
This is our breakfast room.
It's actually a pity we couldn't get a virtual tour of the house today. We should have organised that. We got Éanna to walk us around. Next time, we'll have to bring you back.
Absolutely.
Éanna, thanks a million for joining us today, because this week we are focusing on F&B from a total revenue point of view, how hotels need to see food and beverage as a lucrative asset, not just an ancillary revenue, and especially revenue managers. So first part, what do you think is the biggest bugbear directors of operations, F&B managers have with revenue managers and sales managers in their teams? I'd be brutally honest. It's okay. Well, we can take it. We can take it.
No, I know. It's the biggest bugbear is always the package allowance. We alluded to this before. It's just everyone, I think, is very protective about their costs. I think it depends on the culture of the hotel or of the business. So what that's really, really important, that comes from the owner, the GM. If the culture is correct, then people are allowed to own their own business, and that's absolutely vital. A lot of the time, you're trying to protect yourself in a hotel, to try and protect your costs, protect your percentages, and so you don't look bad at the end of the month, or your department don't look bad. Whereas what really people have to realize is that we're one business, not several. We're several small businesses within one large business, but at the end of the day, the bottom line of profit is the same for everyone, and that's what's most important.
So how should we do it?
Exactly, yeah. Like, how should we actually deal with it? So what are your recommendations in actually kind of combating the revenue managers, giving F&B managers a smaller allowance than they should have?
Well, I think the one thing for food and beverage is that people have to be realistic about costs. It's probably the most difficult area to manage from a cost-based perspective on a daily basis, from your departmental heads of each revenue stream. So you maybe have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 10 different revenue streams in food and beverage alone. From movement of stock all around the hotel to loss of stock potentially. So there's so many different variances that can actually upset your whole balance. I mean, I ran a business that was about 25 million euros in food and beverage. So if you take 1% of that, that's 250,000. If you get 1% wrong on that, that's 250,000 off your bottom line gone in costs. That's only like if you take a third of a percent off food, beverage, and wages, which is not much in the grand scheme of things, but in the bottom line, it's huge. I think food and beverage managers and chefs from a general manager's point of view need to be, when they come into the position first, need to understand the bigger business strategy. I think that's something that doesn't happen. You're dropped into when I was starting to come up, it was really, why is this percentage wrong? Not, well, tell me how to do it in the first place. So it all starts with training. You need to invest. One thing I do is I make sure every one of my departmental heads understand what their ownership is, what they're responsible for, and how they can achieve it. Because if you don't spend time with them and sit down with them and make them understand how they can achieve it, then the numbers don't fit there. When you do that properly, revenue, you can, as a food and beverage director, as a director of operations, as a head chef, that's when you know your costs are in check. You can allow 20, 30, 40% off things in certain packages to make that happen for the better of the business. And that's one thing. Like, if you're driving volume through a certain package, the allowance can be cheaper. But it's all about investing into people, investing and training how to do that in the first place.
Can I ask a question? So you're mentioning training, and this is something we all know, and Thompson is on the call. So hey, Tom, how are you? Do you think that the practical element of how to run your department is not really shown or trained enough in hospitality colleges across the world? Do you think the real life experience is completely different to what they're being trained, and that they need to kind of step up that? Because from experience, we all know this, when a young chef or a young person comes into our departments, we make them do the jobs that we don't want to do rather than actually teach them exactly what they should learn to be like us.
Absolutely. Well, yes and no. I'm actually the external examiner for GMIT in Galway in the west coast of Ireland. So that gives me a great insight in what they are teaching, GMIT specifically, but like most colleges are of a similar standard. And they are teaching. I've got 3 emails to reply to today from GMIT lecturers, doing what their coursework is over the next 10, 12 months. And what's really, really important for them is teaching them everything financial, operational, and that they're coming out with a good base knowledge. But until you're actually in the business, and once you get into business, I mean, I went to college in Birmingham. I did hospitality management. Once I got into the business, what I taught there was great, but then you don't use it until you become a head of department. That's where the difficulty lies. So really, if I'm going in as I started off in the K Club. I went in as a bartender immediately after college. Back then you did your full sort of work around in every department before you became a manager or a supervisor. And I didn't learn anything about management or revenue streams or departmental costs until I was responsible for it. And then suddenly, why is it right? Why is it wrong? And you don't know. So this is one thing that was really important to me. When the Ritz-Carlton, I worked in the Ritz-Carlton in Ireland, we had a recession, obviously, in the world back in 2008. The Ritz-Carlton opened at the very end of 2007. The Celtic Tiger ran out the door a few months afterwards. That to me, like, I was promoted to director of food and beverage there in the following July, so that of July of 2008, and that was probably the hardest thing I ever had to do, because I had to look at how to break down right into every single line of cost, including managers. I had to break down relationships with friends who we opened the hotel together, and then suddenly be their boss, and that really gave me a strong understanding of what they knew. Because and what they didn't know and what I didn't know, and that was a massive steep learning curve for me. So I actively went out and asked for help a lot, and I got it. And then I was able to fix things from asking the questions. But too many people, one, don't get taught in the first process, and secondly, then won't ask for help because they think they should know. So it's a very.
But do you think it's a mix of education and probably also the way the simple reporting is done, that currently it's not really available or not in a very clear way for to be shared with the various teams?
Absolutely, it's not shared. That's the bottom line. It's very rarely shared. Whereas, like, we got into the Ritz-Carlton, the same in Ashford Castle, the same in where I worked previously. I've been able to share, like, I'm not talking about RevPAR and I'm talking about their departmental revenue, because each department essentially has its own P&L. So when you can share that and understand and get, like, I've had GMs who didn't want anyone to know anything. So I've had to tell people things and say, don't let on because it was negative culture. Yeah. But it's really important, unless my manager, like if my restaurant manager, is failing every P&L and on costs, and he doesn't know how to fix it, I can't be in every department all the time. I'm one person running a 10 to 25 million euro business. You have to be in, but you can't do everything yourself. So you have to rely on, and that's where you train and teach your managers to own and like run their business, and you're there to help them, assist them, and bring them on. And by bringing them on, their business thrives. And then that knocks down into their assistant manager, their supervisor, and their team, because 10 minutes a day you do a briefing in a restaurant, a bar, before we open. And if you don't have the information to share with the teams, if my pot washer doesn't know the price of, like, one of my plates in Ashford Castle used to cost about €65 to buy, plus VAT. So if they're not taking care, putting them into the dishwasher, you're just throwing money away and they're breaking. So we had pictures on walls in the kitchens, laminated, obviously for safety and easy cleaning, but we had them so they understood with the cost of the plate, so they understood the reasoning why we were and why they needed to take care of these things. So if they don't have the information, you're absolutely right, B. If they don't have the information, they can't thrive, and they don't develop as a manager either. And that doesn't help your business. The more you train, develop your managers, the more it helps your business. The more they're invested, the more they understand, and the more they want to stay. I'm a firm believer that people don't leave businesses most of the time, they leave people. So unless you're investing in them, they're not going to stay. And then you're only going through a whole extra costs of recruiting and time and retraining. So like it all sort of flutters down to cost.
So there's another $1 million question here, and that is, who should forecast F&B? Revenue, commercial managers, or F&B staff?
I would say with the proper training, F&B staff, but being overseen by revenue, because revenue is the king of revenue, the queen of revenue. You revenue people know revenue. Food and beverage staff don't know revenue until you're at a higher level and you delve into it because you have to, and that's part of your job, and you want to as well. But my restaurant managers, my bar managers would have a huge influx into how I would forecast revenue and the reasoning behind, and also the budget, because they know the departments better than I do. I know them obviously excellently, but they work in them every single day. And it's really, really important. I mean, I'm very lucky like that I've been in like a big brand like sort of Ritz-Carlton, and independent brands like smaller brands like Red Carnation, Ashford Castle, to Carton House which was an independent. So everyone does things very, very differently, and when you look at that, you have to change roles and how you see things. But absolutely, I think food and beverage managers should be, once they're allowed, being given the time, and that's what's really important, because they don't get sitting in office all day and forecast revenues. They grab 20 minutes here, 10 minutes there, half an hour here on their phones when they're at home looking at emails. So it's really important that they are allowed the time to do it as well, and that the business supports that the cost involved in that in their own mini businesses.
I think there's a few comments
on that.
Sorry.
Sorry. I do agree with you on that, Eamon, because you think a lot of the time the food and beverage manager is pretty much, he's seen as the additional staff member. Whereas, if you're a revenue or a sales manager, you get to sit either in an office or be on the floor, but it's at your own will. It's not really as part of staff or part of a roster. So I totally agree with you on that one. We did have a question before B jumps in with her things. Pablo asked a question. Do you think that digitization of a cost system is an investment, or do you think it should be up to the hotel to do for a property to manually do it themselves? Do you think people should invest in technology to help with their forecasting and budgeting and all that kind of stuff from that type of thing? Well,
absolutely. If it's right for the business. I mean, if you have a small luxury hotel, or even not luxury hotel, that's owned with 25 bedrooms, and you've the owners who are both the GMs and and heavily involved, then it's harder for them to cost that into their business and have it as an acceptable cost. Whereas if you somewhere a bigger hotel, bigger brands, and like sort of you look at 3, 4, 5-star hotels who have 100+ rooms, absolutely, because the more you can give back time to the operational managers to spend time with their guests, only builds the brand and keeps that going. So the more time you can spend with the guest is so important as well. So that's one of the biggest things, because the more you build customer service, build your brand, build your loyalty, build your guest retention and referrals from that, the more revenue streams come in from that. So if you have a system that can save you time and saves you energy, and you can concentrate on the actual operation. Because at the end of the day, we're here in food and beverage and in the whole hotel, but food and beverage's biggest aim is to create memories and experiences for people. And that's what people come back. Because you spend more time with food and beverage staff members than you do with any other member of the team in a hotel. You come in, you get welcomed at the door by the concierge. They're really lovely and they're great. They bring you to the reception. It's lovely, but it's functional as well. It's a transactional thing that has to happen, but the receptionists are fantastic. They do a great job, and then you're brought to your room, and from that, the rest of the time you spend in food and beverage or the gym maybe or the spa, but the spa will be similar to food and beverage or the bar, but that's where you spend most time with people in food and beverage, and that's where you create the memories and experiences, and and that's and then you spend more when you invest in a brand personally from a guest point of view. You will spend more in that place.
So I guess leaving that to, as you said, to the expert is great, but one of the issue, and that's kind of what I understand from Pablo's question and Sylvia, is like sometimes the data is not good actually. So it's how can we make sure that all teams understand that a revenue manager can deal with the data, I guess, of course, having someone sitting next to him and explaining what's going on and what are the plans and the changes or the opportunities that the F&B is seeing. However, very often the data is not clean and it's not split in the right way, or you just cannot really use this data. So is there any tools you think that is needed, or is it more like, as we were saying, like training and common sense and making sure that the team is involved and get the result of why we're asking them to itemize every single thing, for example?
Well, the data has to be right. If the data is not right, you're in reverse from the start. So what's absolutely vital is that whoever is providing data, because food and beverage doesn't provide the data for reception or food and beverage doesn't provide data for anybody. The data is provided by people in the offices as such. So if accounts or if revenue or if sales, whoever's providing data, it has to be broken down clearly first. And that comes from the owner / GM to make sure that the departments providing data are given the facilities to provide the correct data. Like if you're not given the right data in the first place, you might as well just, it's like you might as well guess, and you can't train people without them. What's vital for me is that once you have the right data, like the systems in place to train need to be put in, and that's an investment in time and money. So I would want in my next role, it's something I never quite achieved, but I got a little bit of achievement in it, is the revenue manager to spend time training my managers exactly, or training me exactly perfectly what the expectation was and how we do it in that group. Because as I said, every hotel, every group does things slightly differently, and it's not, no matter how experienced you are, it's not always an easy flow through into it.
I can see Suzanne is literally holding on to the
Right. Okay. If we just go back to the forecasting question about who does the forecasting, that was a bit of a leading question. So I actually agree with you. I think that food and beverage should execute, but there is a hard reality in hospitality that Kat's just made a point about how you spend the time in F&B, and your point about the experience. If you've got a revenue manager that's sitting behind that desk, well, the first thing I'd say to that revenue manager is get yourself out from behind that desk and learn your business. Because if revenue managers want to protect their roles in hospitality, this is the way to do it. Get amongst food and beverage, learn and understand exactly how these forecasting models work, and solve the problem for the food and beverage directors. So that's the first point. The second thing is that if you have got that revenue manager that is accomplished and understands the different levels of business, then they should be executing the forecast, but getting it signed off by the F&B, so that guest experience on the floor is still second to none, but you've got someone in the background checking and doing what they do best, which is analysing the data. So if you bring those two things together, it would be amazing to think about all your heads of department having the time to spend an hour or 2 hours each week, ploughing through this information. But the fact of the matter is they don't. Revenue managers need to get out from behind the desk, learn and understand the food and beverage side, and start to support what happens with operational delivery on the floor. So that's genuinely, I think, what should happen in hotels to protect payroll costs, develop revenue managers, and give the food and beverage directors the space and time they need to control their costs.
No, absolutely, I agree with you 100%. I mean, that's something I had in the back of my mind, is that a lot of time revenue managers don't know the food and beverage business, because it's, unless you work through it, it's not an easy business to understand. And like, it doesn't, like, coming from it, when I was starting to learn about the sort of the revenue side of things, I was blown away with how sort of intricate it was to get it right, and how easy it was to get it completely wrong. And that's absolutely vital. That's why, like, I spend a lot of my time with my managers, training them to understand the revenue side of things. But I'm not naturally a revenue manager, so that's not my forte.
Absolutely.
I'm decent at it, I'd like to think, but I'm not like, and I've always been successful in it. However, it's not, I haven't been trained on it fully. I haven't spent enough time with the right people, probably. I would say that's one thing that might let me down in the future, that I'm going to like look at for next year. It's actually one of my, after talking a couple of weeks ago in the pre-brief, I wrote down to look at revenue going forward, to learn a bit more. But you're right, though. I think it's really important and vital for the food and beverage managers and the restaurant managers and the director of operations to understand their own business and understand the revenue side of it. But if a revenue manager can come in and assist them to develop their skills even more, we're into a golden era of your hotel.
Just picking up as well, just one thing about the systems, just one last thing about the systems, because there's a couple of people just saying about, being data cop, Sylvia. I think the other thing is that food and beverage and maybe the general manager getting their heads together to make sure those system configurations are correct. So I think Pablo's point about itemising every single line of the revenue, it's going to come down to your point of sale, your PMS, and what systems you operate. If they're configured correctly, your data isn't going to be crap in, crap out, is it? It's going to be on point. Then the revenue manager can support food and beverage and deliver correctly. But in my experience, I don't know about you, you might agree, the systems are never set up correctly. That would be the first place. Audit your systems, audit them.
They're never set up correctly, and and a lot of time the hotels buy one level down in what they need to report correctly. So I've often I've worked mostly with Micros, so that's my sort of forte in that. So with Micros, often I've had to convince our ownership to buy that extra package, which might cost 20, 30,000, but within 2 years, that's paid off 4 or 5-fold with revenue and understanding from a menu engineering point of view. Like, one of the biggest things I look at from food and beverage point of view, you need to menu engineer and look at your menu, your sales items every 2 weeks, 4 weeks minimum, but I would try and do it every 2 weeks. And it's a simple report to pull off and type up and to understand what's selling, why is it selling, why is it not selling. And if it's not selling, why is it there? Again, and that's really, so getting that correct data, as B was alluding to, is really, really important, because if without that correct data, I can't run a business. Like, it's like I'm not a mechanic. I can't go and fix my car. If I'm taught how to fix a car, as a mechanic, I can fix it. It's the same in food and beverage management or hotel management. Okay. If you know this, if you have the skill set and you have the tools, then you can go and do it. If you don't, it's very hard to. But like menu engineering, I think, is vital. How you lay out, even things like for revenue point of view, how you lay out your menu, how you put prices on a menu. Like, I would never put prices all the way down in one line, because people only look at price. Then you put the price beside the item, so it's almost, and you don't put them from least expensive to most. You mix all that up, so people aren't focusing on price, they're focused on the experience, what they're looking at the menu, not necessarily that. And that's from doing that. I hate the word upsell, but from doing that, you can upsell, you can get that extra revenue, you can engage with that person more, because they're asking you more questions as well about because they're not seeing, right, house wine's €35, most expensive wine is €15,000. They don't see an A to Z, they just see numbers muddle up in this amazing wine menu or this fantastic cocktail menu. So when you sort of almost, it's a psychology as well. You almost have to sort of take people out of their comfort zone of, here's your A pricing. Well, I always go for the house wine, but you might hate the house wine, but you go for the cheapest. Whereas when you have, and also what you want to sell most, you have to know from menu engineering as a front of house and chef working together, what's your what do you want to sell most of? So what's your biggest margin item on the menu? You know, so if you're big, like obviously soup would probably be in general, like it's probably the least sold, but soup would be the biggest margin item on the menu because it's so cheap to, especially in luxury, it's so cheap to make, and you can put a premium on it. Whereas you have that up close to the top of the menu, you have to, and the more expensive things you have lower, because everyone's, if you're looking at a menu, everyone looks at top left, top right, and slowly goes down, but their eyes are always brought back to top left and top right. And if you have great sort of menu items that are with great margins on top left and top right, that's what people will go for a lot of time. It's a lot of psychology as well.
There's huge opportunities there, because like when and that's really when you, I think I've realized, you sit down with F&B, that you're looking at each items, for example, and you're like, look, I need 20K at the end of the year, an extra 20K coming from nowhere. Well, maybe this is an extra 50p on your avoine toast that you sell, that's your best seller, and that you're going to sell like times 30, times whatever per month, per day, etc. And that's really where it becomes fun. Like you can really make some revenue management with F&B, and you can really look at opportunities. One thing that I find is still lacking in this relationship is, how do we really track the revenue throughout the day? For example, what's the spend per table, per minute, per hour, etc. And that's where we can really work together, saying, look, you have a time slot where you barely have, like, people are spending, like, I don't know, 5 quids an hour. This is crap. We want to have 7.5 or 8. How do you do that? How do you target and challenge your F&B teams? And those are the kind of thing that I guess can be supported by the commercial teams a bit more, to help F&B to boost their revenue. End of the day, that's an amazing profit. The team is there. The coffee costs nothing, so let's sell another one.
Yeah, that's it. It's and that comes down to engaging with your guests, but also from the training point of view. One thing I set up in my last hotel was we did in the off season, which is about 4 months. You're still busy, but you're not as busy as the summer months. We set up like 18 of our suppliers came in and did trainings 3 or 4 times a month, and it's 20 minutes, half an hour training. I get like, and they were the ones that came in. We picked them between me and the chef, which were given the highest margins and the best sellers that we wanted to sell. So we trained our team on the absolute knowledge of as much as possible on everything. But with the things you want to sell, we brought in externals, spend time with them, let them taste the product, where it came from, be it cheese, be it beef, be it wine. We brought in obviously the wine suppliers, which might have been in France, New Zealand. You can't bring them in, but we brought in like the suppliers in Ireland, and I did the same in the UK many years when I worked in the UK years ago. And it's really, really important that you invest that knowledge into the team. But but also, as you said, you menu engineer, you look at the best selling item and you throw 50 cents onto it or 50 pence onto it, and immediately it's free profit. Yeah. You know, but there's a reason why everyone looks at a burger and a club sandwich and room service menu and think, God, that's expensive, but they still order it. Like they're the two biggest. That's why they're expensive, because they're the two biggest sellers worldwide in any room service menu. Pretty much is a club sandwich and a burger. So therefore, you put a premium on it. There, people are still going to order and eat it because they know it's good. They know it'll be good. They know it'll be like they like it, and it's a real room service thing. So there's huge premiums to have in certain dishes as well, from a revenue point of view, that you can drive forward.
Can I just pick up on Olga's point about F&B enhancing room sales? I don't know, Christina, if you were just going to say the same thing, but I'm going to, first of all, bring it back to systems, because if your system reports total revenue by market segment, then you've got a really good chance of identifying the gaps and using those F&B promotions to drive room sales through your gaps. But equally, when you're looking ahead and you want, say it's January and you want the January sale, £50 for a room, 250 spend on food and wine, it's a no-brainer. It's an absolute no-brainer. So I think August's point's spot on. It's not always about achieving that highest rate. It's about your food and beverage spend.
No, that is the thing as well. Like one of the things, like in the Ritz-Carlton in Ireland, obviously when the recession hit, I was originally the lobby lounge manager, which is it was a 100-seater lobby lounge and main bar, and it was ridiculously busy because everybody in Ireland, as you know, is quite nosy. So everyone in Ireland wanted to come and have a look at the Ritz-Carlton. So we were the busiest department and we smashed all our targets. Unfortunately, with the recession, the rest of the hotel didn't do so good at the time. But one of the things during the quieter periods, I trained all my team. I got to show a room. So we always had a room, because you walked in the fourth floor of that hotel. We always had a room, 418, 419, whatever it was, that was open. We had a card for it, two cards for it. And if we had a guest that our team, be it like one of the waiters, one of the bartenders, could realize that this person might be a future guest, we'd show them they'd take them to the room and show them and spend 10 minutes with them and show them, like, because with the average room, the smallest room up in Ritz-Carlton was 50 square meters. So it was huge. So like the small, we were sat and they'd wow at this room and say, oh, this is only the smallest one. If you did an upgrade, you could do, and we taught them from front of house and myself how to talk to the guest. So, and they loved it. And it really engaged our team. Like, nobody left that team for maybe 2 years, almost, maybe 1 or 2, but out of 25, 30 people, everyone stayed because they got taught things and they wanted to stay, which was really, really lovely to see. So it wasn't massive room revenue, in fairness, but it was an extra link to how you engage the customer to come back.
I love the way you mentioned about bringing them to see rooms. I think showrooms are gone. I think they're a day of the past, and that's quite interesting because actually recently enough, now that we're in this time where walk-ins are happening, we should be showing people rooms, and we should be keeping a room, because we're not all full. No matter what people are saying in your group, they're not full. But we should be keeping a room looking absolutely immaculate, that we can actually showcase our product and make sure that our restaurants, even if it's only a small area that we've opened for in-house, is immaculate, so that we can try and upsell as much as we can. And I can say that we're getting huge good feedback in regards to your menu engineering. I've got a feeling you're going to have a lot of questions after this about this. Make sure you follow Aina on LinkedIn. Feel free to send him loads of messages if you've got questions. I'm sure he's only going to be happy to help you. Don't ask us. But when it comes to, and we've touched on this very lightly at the start, package allowance.
Yes.
Breakfast allowance in restaurants, dinner allowances in restaurants. You've had years of experience of luxury markets, dealing with very touchy revenue managers. What way? And chefs, yes, exactly. And sometimes the chefs don't even have a clue, the numbers, or even the financial controller, if the financial controller is involved. These guys just do, that's it. And they look at the price, and some people look at the actual price that they're able to get versus the actual cost price. What are your recommendations to actually creating correct package allowance and agreeing them across the board, not only with the chef, the GM, but also the revenue team?
So it's really interesting, that question, because one thing you have to realize is that you're one team and we're one business. Like, there were not several businesses. It has to be led by the GM and the financial controller to a point of view that realistic costs have to be set up. And there's ways to push costs into different areas as well. But if you're being based on a cost on selling full price in food and beverage all the time, and your food cost, your wage cost is based on that, then it's very hard for a food and beverage manager or director or a head chef to not be protective of their costs. It's when, one thing we did in one of the hotels is we had a very prominent chef, and we moved the whole of the breakfast revenue. We got zero breakfast revenue, or €4 for 1 year, because it was €19 revenue for breakfast we got net at that stage. We moved it all in to avoid paying, funnily enough, a massive premium. So we saved huge money, but it didn't affect the costs because we knew it was coming, and everyone worked towards that. So when you work towards, right, we understand that next year we're going to bring down cost of your put your wage cost up by 0.5% in that department because we're taking money off you to give to rooms. And it's very, very important to understand that. And, I have no issue. I've never had an issue with like, realistically, you give 10 to 20% off everything. There should be sort of like, I don't know, levels, I suppose. Like if you look at like levels of percentage. Now, you can't, like in certain, I've never run like a 2-3 star hotel, so they're obviously going to be tighter. But in a luxury hotel, you generally have, the better packages and better revenue streams and better percentages to be able to allow a bit more off. And it's all about training. Again, back to training, because if your head chef and your food and beverage director work with the revenue manager and are supported by the GM and the financial controller, then we just work towards one goal. Now, I've had many chat with sales and marketing directors, especially in Ritz-Carlton, way back when, in Paris Court, when we were really struggling, and it was all about, because what we essentially 99% of the time going up to ownership in Ritz-Carlton, it's RevPAR, it's room rates, it's that's what makes the profit. I always say that food and beverage creates experience, but rooms create the profit. And that's fine. Now, the room has to be gorgeous, it does create an experience, but most people just sleep in the room, have a bath, and relax. But like your real experience, what brings you back is people. So it's very hard to make people understand that, though, and that's my biggest difficulty that I found previously is that I'm talking to head chefs who can be difficult, also revenue managers who can be difficult, and I'm trying to appease them both, but making the best decision for the business. Because I came from a couple of managers who were mainly hoteliers, not necessarily food and beverage. They were hotel first, food and beverage second. So that gave me a broader sort of outlook on how to run a hotel or how to run a business within a hotel. So it's really important for me to bring everyone together and understand why we're doing something, and then also giving them, well, you're not going to be punished. Because I often found some businesses punish people in P&L reporting lines the following month. It's more like they show people up when they don't hit a percentage, and because of that, it creates that sort of banging of heads in food and beverage and revenue and culinary and revenue, that they're so protective of that 0.3 of percentage point that they can't lose it, but they don't understand that they actually can. It's fine. Make it up somewhere else. Let's work together to create packages that are amazing. Not, oh God, here comes another package he or she wants. And it's working together and getting those packages together rather than working apart. And that's what I find really, really important.
So what's the trick then? Having F&B directors into the weekly commercial meeting, for example, and making sure that.
Absolutely. I used to ask you. So I got told a couple of times there was no need for me to be there, and I was like, well, there is, but okay. And I didn't go because I wasn't allowed. But like, that was many years ago now. But knowledge is power. Like, so the more knowledge you give someone, the more they can help you. Not like the more you hold from them, the less they can help you. And I find it's really, really important that, with managers, up and coming managers, young food and beverage managers, and chefs teaching their chefs as well about the revenue, about like package allowances, and about where, like, there's so many savings to be made in food and beverage. Like a small tweak on a purchasing, milk, butter, things you go through so much of, by making sure you're looking every 6 months, on like wine, obviously beverages, like things you're buying loads of. If you can shave off, a third of a percent here, a third of a percent there, suddenly that comes up to 1-2% when you do it over across a few lines. So people have to be more innovative, but they have to be allowed to be innovative, and they have to be allowed to be, that they won't be punished in the next P&L meeting. Because I think that's one of the things that, going into, I've seen a lot of stuff like where people are victimized almost, because they're down 2% or they're up 2 percentage points of wages, and there's perfect reasoning for it, but because it just says it on the figures, that's it, they're wrong. But there is reasoning behind it.
I know, but the figures aren't wrong, are they? The figures are never wrong. It's about the acceptance of the person you have to report to that says whether it's okay or not. And I think that I agree with you. I think it's one business, and everyone in an independent luxury hotel, that's the perfect setup. But equally, I've worked for brands. I ran a big hotel in Edinburgh, and on a Friday, when your forecast is 3% out from rooms and any of your cost margins are out, you're on a GM call with 13 other GMs, all hoping that you're not told to stay back on that call to get roasted by the henchman at the end of it. So, and that's actually, I know it sounds odd, but that's actually a really good experience. I mean, you'll understand that, that brand experience really does help you go forward, especially if there's any revenue managers or commercial people that want to move into GM positions that are very commercially led. I think that brand experience is really invaluable. The fear of that roasting keeps you focused. It really does.
Absolutely.
I feel sick. I feel sick even thinking of it.
One of my scariest moments was when my very first full-on corporate, obviously I was in P&M monthly meetings, but full-on corporate was with the EMEA of Ritz-Carlton. And and the gentleman is a huge hotelier. He's amazing, but he sat at the end and he just did this at the boardroom table, and it was my first time presenting properly to anyone like this, and it was a 30-minute presentation of how I was going to turn an £800,000 loss in 7 months of food and beverage into breaking even by the end of the year, which obviously is difficult. And at the end of my presentation, he just looked up and says, "Thank you. What else?" And I was like, "Pardon?" I froze.
Yeah.
It's the reality of the session. He goes, "That's grand, but what else do you have?" And it wasn't like he meant to say, "Is there anything else?" And he said this to me afterwards, but he just said, "What else?" And I froze. So in every single meeting ever since, I have a "what else" on a sidebar, like ready to go. I've never had to use it since, but it's how you're asked the question. But you're right about, like, those meetings where you do get, your percentages have to be correct, but there has to, people have to understand the reality of why they might not be correct as well.
Yeah, for sure.
And they have to not accept them and just say, "Oh, that's fine, no problem at all," but understand there is reasoning why percentages don't hit sometimes, and that's where, and encourage you, because if you're just wrapped in knuckles every single time, and that is not it. And again, Olga just said there, communication is key. I mean, this there's a saying from George Bernard Shaw: the single biggest problem with communication is that a lot of the times people have the illusion that it's actually taken place. That's not word for word verbatim, but it's true. People think they've communicated effectively, but they haven't. And so one of the things I always ask is, can you repeat back to me, like, when it's like, I'm not talking about the go and clear a table, but when it's complicated and you're talking about figures, can you explain back to me what exactly, when they're learning, what exactly my expectations are of you? And a lot of the time, about 60% of the time, it used to be 70%, I used to communicate properly to them, and they used to think I was asking them to do something slightly different. So I learned to myself to try and communicate really directly, really simply, in really, like I used to write paragraphs on emails and things. Now it's like very short, but years ago, now it's extremely short bullet points, very clear expectations, one-to-one meetings, small, 20 minutes. Like some people have meetings for 2 hours, 1 hour. My meetings with managers are 20 minutes, in and out. Let's get back to our actual jobs.
I love this. And saying that, we just realized we need to let you get back to your job. Aina, I just want to say thanks to me for joining us today. It was absolutely fantastic to have you on the show. We've had so many good comments, so many questions, and I love how everyone pretty much agrees it's all down to training, it's all down to communication, and it's breaking down them silos and making everyone understand their area, their department, and how we all impact on the bottom line. If anyone wants to get in contact with Aina, feel free to reach out to him on LinkedIn. He's also one of the main figureheads behind the hashtag Irish in France on Twitter. So if you ever want to see what he gets up to while he's away, trust me, don't do it on a rainy day because you'll just get really upset. Then go onto Twitter and put in Irish in France and you'll find him. Thank you so much for joining us today, Aina. And we will be back next week, and we will have Lauren Maloney on the show talking all about spa, who actually would have worked with Aina in the past, which is very strange. So we'll see you all next week. Same time, same LinkedIn channel. Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.